Hello, and thank you for coming to my first ever talk. My name's Daniel, and for the last 4 years, I've been developing a system for building decoupled, API-driven web apps, which I've called the Components Web App, or CWA for short. When this project began, I was noticing the rise in the popularity of front-end frameworks, and as a Symfony developer, API platform caught my attention. I then decided to play with one of those frameworks, Vue.js, and the SSR capabilities that Nux was bringing to the platform at the time. And then I had a thought. Could we create a data structure that could represent any website? I started thinking about this question, and I thought, well, what would be the benefits of that? Why should we do something like that? So I thought, with the predictable data structure, we'd reduce the repetitive tasks involved in creating websites, much like a framework, allow developers to easily implement advanced and powerful features, create a consistent, fully featured user interface for the end user to manage their website, and the content management experience could be extended into a custom website builder experience, much like your own personal Wix or something like that. The data loaded for each page could be in small cacheable requests, so the speed loading should be good. And implementing reusable UI components will ensure consistency. So a developer can allow variations in the UI, but with restrictions, so the end user wouldn't have the complexities of editing the code and introducing bugs. It could also streamline the process of building many websites for developers and project managers. And in a data-driven world, the website data could be made available for other tools and feeds. So if you have a section which is your news articles, you could open up your API and provide other applications with that data as well. So the data structure that I came up with was all built based around the concept of reusable components. So when I talk about a component, I'm thinking of a UI component in a website. So in a very simple form, that would be an HTML content component, a block of text, or maybe an image, or it could be a hero area on a website. So this is the data structure I initially came up with. There are a few of these resources which are the visual resources. So they're the ones which use the UI trait. So they're where you're going to define your UI component name and some class names. The rest of them are all to do with the structure of your website. So a user comes in, they go to a root, the contact page, or the about page. That then loads up the page. The page itself, obviously, will usually have the same layout, sort of headers and footers across your website. So we link to that resource as well. And within each of those resources, we have groups to hold our components. So header area or footer area, or on a page, you might have a bar on the left or the right, something like that. Then we have the component position, which is the locator resource, which will position the component within the component group and tell you what order it's going to be in. And that's the initial structure I came up with. This is a little bit more visually. So you can see we've got the header area there and the footer area. And in the page, on the left-hand side at the top, we've got component number 5, but in the bottom on the right, you've got a reusable component, so you could also stick that there as well. But then there was more to the structure than that. I sort of thought of things as static and dynamic pages. So a static page would be your about page, your contact page, something where the component is the same and the data is the same every single time. So on the about page, the about text will always be the same. But on the dynamic pages, you have a news article, for example, where you know there's going to be a block of HTML text, you know that component's going to be there, but the data is going to be different every single time you load up that page. So I introduced a new resource into that data flow called the page data resource. So the flow looks a little bit like this. You come into the root, and it first of all hits some page data. This is an abstract class that you extend yourself. We then go through the flow the same. We hit the page, we hit the layout, go to the component groups, and when we get to that component position, we reference a variable within the page data which is type hinted to be the right component name as well, so be the right type of component. So we know we're loading an HTML component into that component position, but the data will be different every time. And then if that doesn't exist, we can still fall back to a normal static component if we want to as well. So the component, if you were to create one, looks something like this, and should be very familiar to most of you here. You create your HTML, you create your entity, and you simply extend the abstract component. The name of the component is HTML content in this case, and the only data that you'd need to be able to manage and change in every HTML content is the text itself. So you can put your assertions on there, you can put your validation on there, and map in your columns as needed. A page data resource would look something like this. Again, You could have your search and order filters on there, and you can define that it uses Mercure as well, which we'll talk about how I've integrated Mercure into this system as well. But then you type hint your HTML content component into the variable name, and then your component position would reference HTML content there as well to load it in. So to extend this further into this framework I've created, I wanted to put in reusable and easy implementation of advanced functionality. So one of the first major things that we added in was publishable annotation. So when you're editing a component on your website, you'll want to start changing it, but you don't want that to be available to the end user at that point. So as you start editing, it will create a draft resource, it will feed that one back to you, and that will only be accessible to the administrator. And then you can publish it, you can set a time to publish it. So that's really easy to implement with this. You simply give it the annotation for the publishable annotation and use the publishable trait as well. Apart from that, you can also add validation onto each of the properties, so it only asserts the validation in the published state. So for example, this HTML content component can be added with no content in it whatsoever, but when you go to publish it, it will be validated to make sure there's some content in there. The next thing that we thought would be very important for all websites would be having a component which could have uploadable features. So for example, an image component, you'll want to be able to upload your image to it. So for this one, we just add the uploadable annotation, use the uploadable trait, and we've also integrated with Fly System as well, so that you can save that image either to local storage or to your Google Bucket or something like that. And we've also integrated with Imagine Bundle, so it'll return images at whatever pre-configured sizes that you want and URLs for your front end to be able to fetch that image out from. Then we went one stage further after this, and we thought that there is a couple of built-in components that we wanted to make, which would be very complicated for an end user, and would be very common to be used on most websites as well. The first is the form component. So when we create a form component, we simply have to create a Symfony form as usual. You tell the component what form class it is, and because of API Platform, we can serialize that data, we can process the form. We've added endpoints so that you can submit the form. And when you do submit the form, you can listen to the form success event. And if you wanted to, there's also an easy way just to persist that form data into the database. For example, use a registration form as an example there. We've also added endpoints so that you can validate just an individual field. So in a web app experience, as you're going through a form and you're typing in your information, you'll want it to validate in real time. So we've added endpoints so that you can also do that. And it's all built around the Symfony form component, so you don't have to do anything different on your back end. The next one was a collection component. So in the way that your website loads, it's essentially a proxy component here. So when you have a list of blog articles, you'll want to be able to list that list of blog articles into your website. So this component will essentially proxy through to a GET request and populate some metadata so that you have all of that information in there to begin with. You can set a number of items to show per page, and your default query string parameters. So if you've set some sort of search filtering on there, for example, you can make it so that collection component will already load it in with some certain filter on there. So some other features that we built in before I start getting on to some live demo of what it's ended up looking like. So we also built in some user authentication, which every website's going to need. So that's using the Lexic JOT authentication bundle. And we also built in custom refresh token implementation. A lot of the refresh token bundles out there expose the refresh token to the end user, and we wanted to make sure we were following best practices. So we built that in. We also built in standard user management, so being able to create a user, your forgot password systems, things like that. And we made sure that you could restrict certain resources that would need to be restricted with Symfony security expressions as well. So in your configuration, you can make sure that your draft resources are only accessible via your administrators, for example. You can make sure that certain routes are only accessible if you're logged in, so if you've got account pages and things like that. And then you've got routable resources. So if you've started creating a page, but you haven't created the route to it yet, then you can make sure that those are only accessible if you're authenticated, logged in as an admin or a user, and so forth. There's more to the CWA than that, though. What I've touched on so far is the API components bundle. It's just the API side of it, and only a few of the features as well. So this also comprises of the Nuxt module for the front end, which gives you the whole user interface and your whole content management system. And then a template skeleton application as well, which brings all of those together so that you have a working application that you can get started with. So the front-end module, it provides a framework and functionality to easily access and use the features of the API components bundle. It provides a consistent UI for user authentication and content management. It allows us to easily create components and provides the common content management functionality based on the predictable data that we have. So the fact that we know it's a publishable component, it will have user interface options there to be able to set something to being published, and I'll show you some of that as well in the demo. It also allows the developer to easily build on the extra administration features that you need to, such as in an HTML content component, you'll be able to edit the actual content in that component itself. So again, I'll run through that in the demonstration. The template repository is kind of similar in a way to the API platform. A lot of things actually have been sort of very much inspired by API platform and its skeleton repository. So this one brings together the API components bundle and the front end into a single template that you can use. It includes your Docker Compose configurations and starts up the recommended stack. It includes Helm charts as well, so you can deploy it straight to a Kubernetes stack. And the stack includes the same sort of Caddy, it's a Varnish cache layer, Vulkan, the PHP application itself, and Mercure. So when an administrator is managing the database and you do a change, a front-end user will get a notification saying something has changed on that website, and you can click a button to let them know that to update the content. We also include shell scripts for the continuous integration, so and GitLab configuration by standard. So that's the build, a testing layer as well. So by default, we've integrated with Behat and PHP unit, so you can start writing your tests straight away for the application. It will deploy to staging, Canary, production, and if you have a fork for a feature branch, you can deploy to a separate domain name as well. So that's all sort of, there's a template there for you to be able to deploy in that way. So we've got the live action demo, which I'm going to try and go through now. So I'll start off with a quick walkthrough of the I'll just show you quickly what the API ends up looking like as you start up a skeleton template. So anything with an underscore on it will be, let's try and do that, will be part of the core resources that we were going through in the data structure to begin with, the component groups and the positions there, the layouts. And we've also got endpoints to get some metadata out as well, which is very useful for the front end. The page, the routes, and then anything that's been defined as a component will have the component prefix on it as well. So you can see that we've got the collections and the forms component in there. And then we've also created a couple of components as well already for this website. The front end ends up looking a little bit like this. Let's try and zoom in again. Sorry about this. So here is just a simple website with some HTML content area. On a sample blog page, you'll see here that you've just got a list of your page data resources. You can click through to each one of those resources. Sorry, I'm just going to battle here. Is it obvious this is my first talk? I think it is. So there, it's just got a bit of HTML content that you'll be able to edit on each of your blog articles. And then here's a demonstration of a form that I've defined in Symfony, and very easily in the front end, just being able to render things out. So you've got your real-time validation. Password validation, and so forth. Like that. I can go in and fill in the whole form, but I have a feeling that that will be quite boring. So what I'll do is I'll quickly show you the more fun stuff that comes with this, which is your content management. Can everyone see this okay? Yeah? Okay. So once you're actually logged in as an administrator, this user interface gets a little bit busier. You've got an edit button here, so you can actually go into an edit mode and you can start editing your web page, and you can click on whatever resource you want, and you get your edit bar down here. So you've got your standard content management functionality, which would be, for example, your info, whether it's published, to set it to published, to be able to order, drag and drop reordering, all of this sorts of functionality. And then the component itself. So you can set a couple of different HTML structures if you wanted to, which use the same data. And you can have preset CSS classes that you can give to a user to give them some sort of customization to this as well. And in this HTML content component, we've integrated with Quill. So you can go like so. That's become a draft, which is indicated because it's gone a bit orange there. So when you're viewing the website normally, this will still be visible. We go to edit the page. It's a draft component. The publish tab now has some more information in it, where you can actually edit the live version if you want to, or we can just choose to publish it now. And as soon as you press that publish button, the end user using this website will get a notification to let them know the content has changed, and a little button to update that as well. So I'm going to run through creating a new component and what that process looks like, and how we can make this website look a little bit better than this skeleton that we've got here. So I'm going to try and do that. The first thing that we're going to do, I'm going to try and just talk loudly enough. Can everyone hear me? Fantastic. Ah, you need this for the recording. Fantastic. No problem. It's okay. I'll remember to talk into this when we do it. That's no problem. So the first thing will be we want to create a little bit of color into that navigation bar. So we're going to start editing our CSS a little bit here and add in a few new colors. So into our CSS variables. I'm not sure how many here will be front-end developers as opposed to back-end. So I'm going to generally skip through the front end a little bit quicker. And I'm actually going to go straight back to the back end to begin with. Ah, of course you can't. That would be much more helpful. I wonder if can I mirror this screen? Let's do that. Bear with me, I'm sorry about this. Nope, that didn't work. Yeah, I can't see it on mine now, though. That's the same now. Fantastic. Great. So in the API, the first thing we're going to do is define the data that we're going to need for this component. So we'll create a new HTML, a new hero class here into our database resources. And here's one I prepared earlier. So, I'm just going to walk you through what this one is instead of actually hand coding it while we're here. I know it's less impressive, but it'll be easier for me. And bear with me, I'm sorry. So what we have is our hero entity that we decided to create here, which we've extended the abstract component. We've added the uploadable trait, the uploadable annotation and the publishable annotation here as well. We said that it can use Mercure, which means that these updates will publish to Mercure and the end user will get updated if we change something. We've included the publishable trait and the uploadable trait. And on the file field here, we've added the uploadable field annotation as well. And on the HTML field here, we've got it that it can't be blank once it's published. So the reason for this is because on our hero element, we're going to want to have a background image, and we're also going to want to have some text, so a little bit of information about the website itself. So we've defined what the data is going to be for that component loaded into the website. And that's what we've done. Then for our front end, we've got a few things that we want to be able to do. So we want to define a few different colors that we want to be able to use on the front end. And we're going to add a little bit of color to our navigation as well. So if we go to our primary layout, so in Vue.js, if you're familiar with it, you've got a layouts folder where you can define your layouts. And basically, that's this file here. And in the CSS, we've just added a little splash of color. That's what we're going to end up with. Spoiler alert. Oh, yeah. I did say in my bio for this, what could possibly go wrong? This. Right, here we go. Hopefully this will carry on updating nicely for us now. So we've added a little bit of color to the background there and added a little bit of styling for that. The next things that we want to do is go to our primary page template, and we want to add a new component group. So we've got lots of mix-ins already available for us here. So in our template, we add this new component group in. We've given it a location name, so that will automatically persist it to the database and create a new component group resource. And we've also got common properties that we can add. We can also define that we only want to allow certain components to be added within this component group with a property there. So the front end's responsible for telling the back end what it's going to need and for persisting that original structure. So now it's got a little new component group here, which we'll be able to select and we'll be able to add components to. But there's no component in there right now because we've said that the IRI that we want to be able to add to that is the heroes component. And we haven't created that component here in our front end yet. So what we're going to do is create it, just like magic. So this one is generally created using some of the components that you have in there by default anyway. So you've got an HTML component, content component here in the skeleton, which gives you a good framework for how to do this. Basically, we are just listening to a variable that's going to be edited in the admin, and we are switching between either the editor or the visual view, depending on what that value is. We've also got the image being added as the background there. So we've added the style class with the background image. We know that we've got some class names to load in, and we've got the HTML content area here. You also have to define which tabs you want to be able to load in. So here we have defined that we are going to look for the hero content and the hero image admin tabs. But I'll show you what this looks like before we do this. Just go clear a few caches. Basically, at the moment, what I'm hoping to see here is the ability to add that hero component, which it does have now. So there we go. We can add that hero component in, and we should have an admin area appear there. I think that things are going to start running way too slowly to continue with the demo. But I could try and plug on. Instead, I'm just going to show you what it is on the website as it is at the moment. This is a fantastic show of how easy to use this system is. After 4 years of work. No biggie. So when deployed to the server here, this is what we would have ended up with. So we've got some new tabs that we would have added into our admin control, which are defined just by a couple of extra fields and some mix-ins into our front end, which look like this. Some simple little toggles that toggle whether the HTML editor should be shown or not, and a simple uploadable field where we define that we are uploading to the file variable and some simple mix-ins there. And when you do that, you get the ability to upload images as you like. And go through and edit your content as you want to. I'm loving it. It's possible. It's possible. Let's see what happens on this one. Well. There is a demo website which is running without this extra functionality in there at the moment, which you can go to and you can check out. It's just demo.cwa.rocks. This one is working and is pretty fast. You can log in with admin and have a little play around yourself. We reset the data every day to just reset back to something that's standard. So you can go and have a little play around with all of this functionality, which is working when deployed there at the moment and isn't slow as hell. We've also got administration for adding new layouts and adding new pages and managing users. And essentially, the idea of this whole system was to allow a web developer to easily create a custom Wix-like website for their end user without all the complications that can come with that, and allowing you to build in your own custom logic and your own custom UI into it. So that was meant to go a little bit better, and there was going to be a lot of thank yous there. Which there are thank yous, and there is a lot of work in the system behind the scenes in terms of how the API works. The API itself is much more advanced than I think I've given credit for in this presentation so far. There's property and metadata factories that we've extended. We've had to link into the event system and provide custom state providers as well. The active community has actually been very, very helpful for me, and I hope that I hope that I haven't put everyone off from this. But we've got out-of-the-box integration with Varnish and Mercure. which was fantastic and does make things load very quickly on the demo site. I promise you it does. And the Mercure functionality is great for the real-time update. So as you update something as an administrator, getting the response back to the end user. Also, API platform just being really well tested and having fast response from Letuya has been amazing. And the whole template application was based heavily on API platform's integration as well. So the Helm charts and Docker configurations and things like that. So we've had some massive help from Antoine, Vincent, Pascal, and fantastic contributions as well along the way. And I think quite a lot more needed by the looks of things there. But there it is. It was working earlier, I promise you. So this is probably the most important part after that demo. If you're interested in getting involved and helping, and you're interested in the concept and the idea of what we've been building, what I've been building, then any feedback you have, any sort of suggestions that you have for the future of CWA would be greatly appreciated. If you can spare time to help with documentation or bug fixes, then obviously come check it out on GitHub. It's all free, it's all open source for you to build things with. And yeah, please come and have a chat, because I would love to know your thoughts. So yeah, I have rushed through a bit, and the demo didn't go to plan, so I'm already on the questions. So I'm sure that, yeah, any questions on what I've presented so far?